making a transition between the end of chapter 1 in Daniel and the beginning of chapter 2, and it just seemed like that was the appropriate way of doing it. So, as you will recall, Daniel and his 3 friends have been in a 3-year course of study, trying to prepare them to be servants of King Nebuchadnezzar. And they needed to have a background in all of the history of the Sumerians and all of the other. I mean, it's a good thing that God gave them the ability to comprehend all of this and to be, wise students. And of course, they had to have a willing heart and mind in order to accept all of the stuff that they were going to be taught. And we know, if you've ever taken a class before or gone through a long course of study, whether it's 3 years or 4 years or whatever, at the end of every course of study, you can expect a final exam. That's all the part we don't like, right? But in our mind, we know that once that's over with, as long as we pass, until you take the next course, you're going to be all right. And so anyway, the idea is that the final exam. Now this is technically, it's supposed to show how much you've learned. They're supposed to be able to look at the results of the test and say, okay, this person understood this portion of it. They weren't really all that sharp on the math part of it, but they really had the English literature down, and so forth. As a result of your exam, you can reasonably expect a good position if you're taking a coursework that's supposed to prepare you to get a job, to get a position, whatever you're taking. This is why when a person is in high school and they're just saying, oh, I hate school and I can't wait till I'm out of school because then I'm going to go do what? What's in the mind of a lot of high school students that really don't see the significance of a high school education? They just say, oh, I don't care about high school because I can always get a job. I can always go work at the Pizza Hut, or I can just go with no idea of what the future is going to be, as if there's going to be this great future working for Pizza Hut. And for the person who's really sharp, then maybe they will become a manager. Maybe they'll become a district manager. Maybe, that's the nice thing about this country, is that if you're willing to put out the effort, you can get ahead. You can even, and I think it's still possible for you to do this. It used to be even more in the past, that you could apprentice yourself and go to work for somebody who was, say, a bricklayer or a mechanic or you name it. And that you would work under this experienced man for a number of years, and then when you had gained enough knowledge that the person you were working under noticed that you had a pretty good handle on it, then he could turn you over to do work where you weren't going to be have to be so much supervised. And there's still possibilities for those kind of jobs out there, but for the most part, depending on the type of job that you're going for, you're going to need some kind of background education of some sort. And so, getting back to Daniel and his friends, we're jumping ahead 3 years. At first, it was the end, right? They stood before King Nebuchadnezzar, and he looked at their physical condition. I don't know if he was aware that they were eating vegetarian or what, but
probably not.
Yeah, they showed an aptitude because he actually questioned each one of them to learn about the things that they were going to have to do. And after they'd had this 3 years of education, they were personally interviewed by the king, kind of like no pressure. If he found you worthy, then you would work directly for him. I can't help but think that this is like being interviewed by the CEO of a corporation, and you're going to start out at the bottom, but you need to get past this interview. You need to make some kind of a good impression. So this is how the interview went that they had with the king. And this is in verse 18 of chapter 1. At the end of the time set by the king to them, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. As the king talked with them, he found them 10 times better than all his magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom.
Wow.
10 times.
And they weren't. Now, I think that just shows you how well God prepared them. Because let's pull the veil back and look at what probably was going on. God has a long-term plan for Daniel and his friends. And he knows that it's important that they make a good impression with the king, because the king, they don't know this, they don't understand this, but Nebuchadnezzar is not going to be the king forever. You look at any country, and kings come and go. They're not there forever. Even when Queen Elizabeth lasted as long as she did, still that's very unusual. So the king talked with them, and he found none equal to them in matters of wisdom and understanding. So they entered the king's service. In other words, they so impressed the king that the king said to himself, I'm sure, I would be a fool not to take these guys on, because these are the best of the best. And that's verse 19. Now, to me, this is the important thing. Because you might say, well, he did well in school, and they did well in their studies, and they were just smart kids, right? But because they remained faithful to God, God could use them for his purpose. If you don't if you conform to the world, like we just heard, Romans 12, don't be conformed to this world, things of this world. if you conform yourself and you kind of put God aside on the side of your life, you're not going to achieve, first of all, you're not going to achieve all that you could have. And more importantly, God can't use you if you're going to be disobedient to His will. And He's not going to be able to use you if you're not focused on Him. If you're focused on yourself, how can He possibly use you? Because it's important, as you can imagine, it's important to be humble. If you're prideful and you're thinking about, oh, look how well I did on this test, and I'm really going to go far, and I'm this and so, with the idea that, and we just learned this the other night in Andy Stanley's, there is a connection between our spiritual life and our physical life. It's not disconnected. We have to realize that the overall big picture. What's the big picture? I'm fond of wanting to know what is the grand scheme, the grand plan. Well, we don't know. God's not taken us into His confidence to let us know all of those things. But we know, just from studying things like this book, we know that God does always have a plan. And we have to, in faith, we have to believe that He not only has a plan, but His plan is 1,000,000 times better than anything we could come up with. Our plans fail miserably in comparison to God's plan. But because they remained faithful, even during all of this, God can use him or use them. So, speaking of the big picture, and I don't know whether it's kind of occurred to you or the question come to you, why were they in Babylon in the first place? And it wasn't just Daniel and his 3 friends. It was thousands of people. There were many that just died. But there were thousands of people that were in a situation where they were carted off. Quite often, the captives are manacled together, stripped of their clothing, walking barefoot to wherever they took them. They didn't load them on a bus and take them wherever it is they were going to take them. This was meant to break your spirit so that you weren't willing to rebel. The people of Judah, of southern Israel, where Jerusalem is, including the king, because remember there was a king in Judah and there was a king in what they call Israel, even though it's not the whole country of Israel, where Samaria is. There was a king there, there was a king in Judah. They turned their back on God. The people had turned their back on God. If your leader says, what's important is we have this great army that's going to hold on, don't worry about the Babylonians, my generals assure us that we're going to blah, 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 blah. No, forget it. What makes you think that's going to happen? But the people had turned their back. And they even led their children in that same direction. So we're told that when they were going to sacrifice to their pagan idols, their pagan gods, the women would make the dough to make these little cakes that would be offered to the, catch this now, what this god was called, the Queen of Heaven. Sound familiar? The Queen of Heaven is what this false god was called. And the men had to prepare the fire, and that they had their part to do. They had to get the ovens ready so that they could bake these little cakes. And the kids were carrying the firewood. So they were involved, and this became part of their whole life. This is what we do. Not understanding that they were turning their back on the one true living God and following some make-believe God. They had also ignored the commands of God. So idolatry, worshiping other false gods, is one of the reasons why they were carted off to Babylon. They'd also ignored the commands of God contained in a covenant, an agreement, a covenant that God had made with them. It wasn't a coincidence that the people of Israel were sent away for 70 years. The people who knew the covenant that God had made with the people understood the 70 years. The people may not have put two and two together and realized that, but those 70 years represented the number of Sabbath years. Every 7 years, you were supposed to leave your fields, because this was an agriculturally based society. You were supposed to let the field sit for a year. So you had 6 years that you sowed seed, you watered, you reaped the harvest when the time came. But at the end of that 6th year, you were supposed to let the field sit and rest. That's where they get the Sabbath rest for the field. It wasn't just for the people. But they ignored it. They said, how are we going to eat if we don't sow another crop?
Yeah, and God had promised that He would provide.
Yeah, God had promised that in the 6th year, He would give them such an abundance that they wouldn't even have to worry about what they were going to eat on that 7th year. And they were also able to, if you've planted anything, you know that even after you've harvested whatever it is you planted, there are going to be some other shoots that are going to come up, that just come up on their own. And they had the ability to be able to eat off of that as well. But what is this saying? If I think that I can't depend, and what's another word for depend?
Trust.
Trust. If I don't think I can trust God to provide food for me, then I'm going to take all this in my own hands. I'm going to say, well, I don't know about this God. All I know is that we need to plant. So for a lot of years, they did that.
There was another aspect too. They felt like, wow, if I cheat on this extra year, and I'll be way ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
There was that greed and ambition.
Yeah. The same thing with the manna that had happened in the wilderness too.
Yeah, collect extra.
These,
Things have changed a lot, right?
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. These years were to make up for the Sabbath years that the people had ignored by not letting the land rest. They were greedy, and they continued to plant their crops when they were commanded to not sow or reap on the 7th year. That's in Leviticus 25:3 if you wanted to look it up and see what that had to say. So they had a lack of trust in God. They worshipped false gods. So these are, and there is a part in there is a part where God lays out in the Old Testament, lays out exactly what will happen if they disobey Him. It's called the curses and the blessings. And part of the curses were that if you worship false gods, if you disobey my covenant, my commands with you, my agreement that I made with you, then these are the things that will happen to you. And one of the things was that your enemies will come and take you away to a place where you don't understand the language, you're not familiar with the culture, all of these things. Your enemies are going to come and take you away. And I'm sure at the time that they had that read to them, they went, yeah, let's get on with it. But this is exactly what happened. God had told them that He would provide for them, giving them that a blessing of abundance on the 6th year. In other words, there was no reason to fear. No reason at all to fear. Of course, God always provides a remnant of faithful servants when the rest are punished. What does that mean? If you go into Lowe's and they sell carpet there, obviously. They're 12-foot wide and sometimes 15-foot wide rolls, and you want to buy carpet for a small room, let's say. Well, the best, financially, the best possible option is to go into this little, usually it's a little section where the rolls are standing straight up, and they're called remnants. You can buy a remnant of carpet that's maybe 10 by 10, or maybe 8 by 10, or whatever. So you look for the size you want to buy. A remnant is a part of the whole. It's not the whole roll, but it's a part of. So if God always provides a remnant of faithful servants when the rest are being punished because of their disobedience, remember that guy, the boat builder, what was his name?
What?
Noah. When Noah built the ark, and God had commanded him to do, and he obeyed Him, and he built the ark, the majority of the people that absolutely ignored the concept of one God. They said, well, your God must not be very, very powerful because you've only got one and we've got like 20. So God said, basically, I want you to take these animals 2 by 2 and take them on the ark because I'm going to flood the earth. And you bring in, not only you and your wife, but you bring in your kids and their husband and wife onto the ark. And there were 8 people altogether that were saved. They were the remnant. Out of that whole population, the remnant, the only people that God saved were Noah and his family. And that was it. They were the remnant. So God has always shown in the past that if He's finally going to say enough, I'm not putting up with this anymore, I'm going to destroy the earth, and really it says, I'm sorry that I created man. But if he keeps a remnant, he can build off of that remnant and repopulate the earth, which is exactly what he did. So that remnant of faithful servants is always going to be there. Even though all these people were carted off, even though probably thousands of them died, there was still a remnant. There were still people. Daniel and his friends were going to be used by God to restore the people of Judah to their homeland. It was never God's intention to completely eliminate his people. I mean, let's face it, every one of these people that lived in Judah, and that includes the priests, the king, the royal family, you name it, every one of them deserved to die because of their disobedience to God. But God's intention never was to completely wipe off the face of the earth his chosen people, but to punish them and to bring them back into his family through repentance and through his mercy. For the same reason that when our children disobey us, we say, okay, here's the rules, here's the house rules. And you know what kids are going to do? They're going to test you. They're going to get up this far from the line, and they're going to put their foot over the line to see what will happen. And if you don't do anything, if you let them get away with it, next time they'll put the whole body across the line. And then pretty soon they're saying, Mom and Dad don't mean it. And they just go ahead and do whatever they want to do. But if our goal is to bring the kids back into the family, then we show them that there are consequences for their actions, which means they're going to be punished for what they've done, so that you can get them to repent, change their way, and to come back, because you've got open arms and you're saying, okay, when you're ready, I'm here, ready to welcome you back. And God has always been that way. He's always been ready to bring people back into the fold, into the family. But it's going to take their repentance. Otherwise, you're just lying, right? Oh, yeah, Mom, I'm sorry. Can I have my iPhone back? Can I have my computer back? I mean, we have to make a judgment call as to whether we feel that they were being sincere in what they were repenting or really not repenting. Because the kids really don't think we're very smart. They think they're a lot smarter than we are. And I don't know.
And we don't realize how smart God is either.
Yeah. So Daniel remained in Babylon, and we're talking about Iraq, modern day Iraq, if you're wondering where. What was his name? The one that we captured.
Saddam.
Oh yeah, Saddam.
Insane.
Saddam Hussein.
Runs with insane.
He was having bricks made. But did it have his name on them?
Yeah, he was doing the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar was. His name's on his bricks too.
Yeah, he wanted to be the Nebuchadnezzar. He wanted to be,
restore Babylon.
yeah, restore it. Well, that didn't happen. Okay, so Daniel remained in Babylon through the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar lasted X number of years. What is the reason usually why a king is no longer king?
He died.
He dies. Sometimes it's at the hand of his enemies. Sometimes he's gone into battle and he's been murdered. Sometimes the assassination happens from within the family, and somebody within his family, within the ranks, assassinates him. So Nebuchadnezzar dies, and his grandson, Belshazzar, is king. And later on in this book, we're going to see the details of where that expression, "Can you read the writing on the wall?" That was Belshazzar. And so Daniel's the one that was there, and he saw all of this drama happening. He saw the powerful king be eliminated. And there's great stories about Nebuchadnezzar, which I'm sure we'll get into later as time goes on. Great stories of hope. And he sees what Belshazzar did. And he saw the downfall of Babylon by the Medes and the Persians under King Cyrus. It happened in 539 BC. So, anybody here have problems sleeping at night? Either falling asleep or staying asleep? Yeah, that was happening with me last night. Wake up at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Why wait?
4 o'clock.
Yeah, can't. I'm thinking about all these things, and I'm sure some of you toss and you turn, thinking of what you have to do the next day, or perhaps you're worried about the what-ifs of life. What if I lose my job? What if the cancer didn't go away? What if? When you're worried about the things that you have no control over, what do they call that? Anxiety. Anxiety is worrying about stuff you have no control over. Absolutely no control over. What if it rains 2 weeks from now? And we're going to have the birthday party? What if... And
Just
get
go out and play in the rain and celebrate.
Yeah.
Kids will love it.
I can't even imagine being president. Well, I know Sleepy Joe doesn't have any problems with that, but when Trump was, I think they said he slept like 4 hours a night. I don't know how a president can sleep at all, considering all of his responsibilities, without drugging yourself every night so that you could go to sleep. But if there's one thing that we can all agree on, and that is what a wonderful feeling it is when we do have a great night's sleep. You might get up once, but the rest of the night you're sleeping. It seems that the great almighty Nebuchadnezzar had a problem sleeping. It was connected with his dreams. You ever had, oh, I know I have, ever had, we would call them nightmares?
Yeah.
You have a dream that is so disturbing to you that you wake up and you go to the restroom, you come back and you lay down and you say, I'm not going back to sleep, I'm not going back to sleep. Because that nightmare's gonna come back. And quite often it doesn't come back. You go into something else, but his mind was troubled. King Nebuchadnezzar's mind was troubled because he didn't understand the meaning. You know, we don't have 100% knowledge of what our dreams are about, but I do believe, as some people will teach, that it is our, we have our conscious mind, the one we're using right now to function. Are you conscious or unconscious? Oh, no, I'm conscious. Okay. But then we have our subconscious underneath, sub. Our subconscious is a kind of like a huge many filing cabinets filled with information, and all of that information has been thrown up in the air and it all snows down on you, and you take this little piece of information and this little piece of information and this little piece of information and you mix it together, and that's what your dreams are like, right? How did I have such a crazy dream? It's because it's your subconscious. It has no conscious. You're not putting... Now, there are definitely times when as we'll see with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, when this dream has a message. There's a reason for this. And Daniel's been prepared for this. God has given him the ability to be able to give the significance, to give the reason. God will reveal it to him. This happened during only the second year of king. It was being a king in 604 BC. So, as all powerful kings will do, he summoned the magicians and the enchanters, as well as the sorcerers and the astrologers, to tell him what he had dreamed. You notice what I just said? He didn't say, gather all my wise people, and I want them to tell me the meaning of my dream. No. He wanted them to tell what he had dreamed, and also the meaning of the dream. He didn't trust them. He didn't trust them. And maybe he's had enough of an experience with Daniel that he knew. If I think his attitude was, if the power that these enchanters and sorcerers that claim to have, that comes from their pagan gods, then they should be able to tell him what he dreamed and what the meaning of the dream was. Because if somebody comes to you and says, oh, let me tell you about a dream I had last night, maybe you can help me to understand what it means. And you can kind of come up with an idea of what you think it meant. It's not something that's necessarily going to be the truth, but if you've got something to work with. But these guys had nothing to work with at all. They had no idea what he dreamed, and they had absolutely no idea. And part of this is so cool. This is the way God works. God sets this up this way because when Daniel comes forward and tells him what his dream was and what it meant, or what it means, God gets all the glory. Because he says, there is a God, and that God has revealed to me what your dream is and what it means. And he already knows that the other guys couldn't say anything. His first move is to decapitate all of his sorcerers and soothsayers and enchanters and
Butchers, bakers, candlesticks.
yeah, that's right. So as we will see, God is setting this up to bring himself glory and for Daniel honor, because he's dependent on God for the answers. It is, and this is what I challenge all of us to do, is to rely totally on God for everything that's going on. The decisions that you make, the things that seem impossible for you to understand. And to not, and to trust his timing to be his good timing. Because normally we'll say, come on, God, I need an answer to this right now. I'm suffering here. God's saying, I know what's going on in your life. And I have an answer for you. But in my timing, I will do it. What does that mean? That means that we have to trust him in order to receive what he's got in mind for us. If we just say to ourselves, well, I must be doing something wrong because I said all the magic words and he didn't come through for me. There are no magic words. Well, maybe to say I believe. That's not really a magic word, but it's absolutely necessary. We're so used to, especially because of the country we live in, we're so used to saying, I can make this happen. I can find a solution to this. And God is robbed of the honor. You in the glory, you could say to him, look, I could try to figure this out on my own, but I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to even go down that road. I know that seems so illogical to us because we want to say we have this brilliant mind and we can figure all this out. And God is saying, really? And how have you gotten along so far? How is that working out for you? I'm working out so well. So just trust me. Trust me. And I'll come through for you. All we have to do is look back at what Daniel did. When he was faced with having to eat all of those foods that were offered to idols that he knew was the wrong thing to do, he could have caved in. He could have rationalized it. He could have made excuses. He could have said, well, this is just for a little. God knows.
I gotta protect myself.
Yeah, God knows. You're right. God knows my intentions, and he knows. No, he just said, no, I'm not going to do this. There's one way for me to do this, and that's the right way. And God will take care of the consequences. He will do it. So next week we will find out what the dream is.
Makes you wonder when mankind is offering a solution. We got this for you. Just trust us.
Right. Right.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. I'll listen to what God has to say.
Yeah.